I still remember the way the paper felt between my fingers, thin, slightly crumpled, carrying the faint scent of Rahul's favorite soap. It wasn't expensive stationery, not the kind I grew up with, just a plain white sheet, folded carefully, with my name written in his messy handwriting, to my dearest Kiran. At that time, I didn't know that this simple letter would change everything. My marriage, my father's pride, and the way I saw love itself. People say the smallest things carry the heaviest truths, and I think they're right. I was born into a world where money spoke louder than words, where gifts came wrapped in gold ribbons and silence meant disapproval. My father, Mr. Prom, had built his empire from nothing, and he reminded me of that every single day. He believed strength was shown through wealth, and love was proven through grand gestures. Then I met Rahul, a man who owned nothing but his sincerity. He didn't drive luxury cars or wear designer suits. He used words the way artists use color, softly, honestly, beautifully. My father never liked him, and maybe, I can't blame him entirely, because in the beginning, even I wasn't sure what to think of Rahul. He was so different from everything I'd known. Quiet, humble, the kind of man who said thank you to the waiter and sorry to strangers who bumped into him. When I married him, against my father's wishes, I thought love would be enough to fill the gap that wealth left behind. But I was wrong. Life isn't that simple. Months later, when I found that handwritten letter in Rahul's drawer, I didn't expect my father to read it. I didn't expect tears to fall from the same eyes that once looked down on him. And yet, that's exactly what happened. This is the story of how a poor man's letter softened a billionaire's heart, and how I learned that real love doesn't come in diamonds, it comes in words written by trembling hands. I grew up in a quiet mansion just outside London, the kind of place that made you forget the world had noise. Our driveway was longer than most streets, lined with trimmed hedges that always looked the same, no matter the season. My father loved order. He said it showed discipline, and discipline was the foundation of success. I believed him. For most of my life, I thought success was what made you worthy of love. Then, one rainy afternoon at a charity event, I met Rahul. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was part of the catering staff, carrying trays of sparkling drinks, while everyone around him spoke of investments, travel, and art. But his eyes, they were gentle, almost shy, as if he saw beauty in silence. When he accidentally bumped into me and spilled juice on my dress, I expected him to panic like others would. Instead, he apologized softly, with a voice that trembled slightly, and offered his handkerchief, not silk, not branded, just clean, simple cotton. That's how it started. Not with diamonds, but with a clumsy apology and a sincere smile. Over the next few weeks, I found reasons to visit the places where he worked. I told myself it was curiosity, maybe even rebellion, but it was more than that. Rahul spoke differently. He didn't rush his words. He listened. When he asked how my day was, I could feel he actually wanted to know. He once told me, "Kiran, people like me don't dream big. We just try to love right." I laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so pure. But my father didn't find purity charming. When he learned about Rahul, he called me into his office, a cold, echoing room filled with glass and marble. "Do you even know who this man is?" he asked, his voice sharp but calm. "Yes, Dad," I said quietly. "He's kind. He's hard-working," he scoffed. "Hard-working doesn't buy you a house, Kiran. It doesn't secure your future. You're too naive." I wanted to tell him that I wasn't that love, not luxury, would keep me warm, but his gaze was heavy, like the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. So I said nothing. Weeks turned into months. My father sent me abroad for business projects, hoping distance would fade my feelings. It didn't. Rahul and I stayed in touch through letters, small notes, sometimes voice messages he sent late at night when he thought I'd be asleep. When I came back, he was waiting for me at the train station, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Not roses, daisies. Because, he said with that shy smile, they're honest flowers. I don't know when exactly I fell in love with him. Maybe it was when he told me stories of his childhood in Manchester, how his mother used to pack him half sandwiches so he could share with friends. Maybe it was when he saved every pound to buy me a book I once mentioned in passing. Maybe it was simply the way he looked at me, like I wasn't my father's daughter, but me. When I told my father I wanted to marry Rahul, silence filled the house. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just said, "If you walk out with him, Kiran, don't expect to walk back in." I walked out that night. My heart was shaking, but Rahul's hand was steady in mine. We didn't have a grand wedding, just a small ceremony at a local hall, 2 witnesses, and 1 borrowed dress. I didn't even wear jewelry. But when Rahul placed the ring on my finger, his eyes glistened, and I realized it was the happiest moment of my life. At first, things were sweet. Our apartment was small, our meals simple, but laughter filled the walls. Rahul would write me notes, short lines like, "Don't forget your scarf, love," or "made tea for you." I kept them all in a small box beside my bed. But as months passed, the contrast between my past and my present grew heavier. My friends stopped visiting. They said they felt out of place. My father didn't call. My world grew smaller, not because Rahul wasn't enough, but because the life I'd known refused to let me go. Sometimes I'd catch Rahul looking at me quietly, as if he was wondering whether I regretted choosing him. I never said I did, but silence has its own language. One evening, I found him sitting by the window, writing something in his old notebook. "What are you writing?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Just thoughts." I didn't ask more. I wish I had, because that notebook held the letter that would one day make my father cry. At that moment, I had no idea that the man I thought was too simple was actually teaching me the deepest truths about love. And the man I had admired all my life, my father, was about to learn them too. The first year of marriage taught me that love doesn't always sound like music. Sometimes it sounds like dishes clinking in silence, or the sigh of 2 people who love each other but don't know how to bridge the distance between them anymore. Rahul worked long hours at a printing shop, often coming home tired but still smiling. He would bring small things, a bar of my favorite chocolate, or sometimes a single flower picked from the roadside. I would smile back, but deep down, I missed the life I had left behind. The ease, the comfort, the conversations that came with fine dining and luxury. I hated myself for it, but the truth is, comfort is a quiet addiction. Rahul never complained, though if he noticed the change in me, he never mentioned it. Instead, he'd cook dinner, ask about my day, and tell me about his customers' stories of old men who printed wedding invitations, or little kids who asked for superhero posters. He always found joy in small things. And sometimes I wondered if I had forgotten how to. One evening, while folding laundry, I received a call from my father's secretary. She told me my father was unwell, nothing serious, just exhaustion. But I knew what that meant. He was lonely. I told Rahul I wanted to visit him. He paused, halfway through slicing vegetables. "Do you think he'll want to see me, Kiran?" I hesitated. Maybe not this time. He still needs time. Rahul nodded slowly, his smile fading. "It's all right," he said softly. "Go. Tell him I wish him well." When I arrived at the mansion, I felt like a stranger walking into my own past. The air smelled of polish and power. My father was sitting by the fireplace reading. When he saw me, he put the book down and smiled faintly. "So," he said, "how's your life in the real world?" "It's fine," I replied quietly. "Rahul is good to me." He raised an eyebrow. "Good or good enough?" I stayed silent. He sighed and poured himself a drink. "Kiran, you were born to lead, not to struggle. You could have had everything." I wanted to say, "I do have everything," but somehow the words didn't come out. Maybe because, deep down, I wasn't sure I still believed it. When I got home that night, Rahul was waiting up for me. The lights were dim, the small apartment warm. He asked gently, "Did he ask about me?" I lied. I said yes. He asked, "If you're doing well." Rahul smiled faintly. That's kind of him. But the truth was, my father hadn't asked anything about him, and that lie stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, things grew heavier between us. Rahul's business hours increased, and I started helping at a local charity, something to fill my days. We spoke less, not out of anger, but out of quiet exhaustion. Then, one night, it happened. We were eating dinner when my father's car stopped outside our building. I didn't expect him to come, not here, not to this side of town. He entered without warning, his tailored suit stark against the chipped paint of our door. Rahul stood up immediately, wiping his hands. "Good evening, sir." My father looked around slowly, taking in the small room, the mismatched furniture, the worn curtains. His silence felt louder than any insult. "So this is where my daughter lives now," he said finally. "Dad, please," I began, but he cut me off. "No, Kiran, I'm just observing. You chose this life, and I respect your choice." His tone was polite, but the bitterness underneath was sharp. Rahul kept calm, though I saw the tension in his jaw. "Sir, I may not give her luxury, but I try to give her peace." My father's eyes narrowed. Peace doesn't pay bills. The silence after that felt endless. Eventually, my father left, leaving the faint scent of his cologne and the echo of pride behind him. When the door closed, Rahul stood still for a long time. Then he sat down quietly. "Do you ever wish you hadn't married me?" he asked softly. I froze. "Rahul, why would you ask that?" He looked at his hands. "Because sometimes, when you talk to him, your eyes look far away." I didn't know how to answer. "I don't regret marrying you," I whispered. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hides pain. "That's enough for me, Den." After that night, he grew quieter. I thought it was because of work, but sometimes I'd find him sitting alone, staring at his notebook, writing something only he could understand. One morning, I woke up and found a small envelope on my side of the bed. It had my name written on it, Kiran. Inside was a short note. "No matter what happens, I hope you always remember that love isn't about who gives more. It's about who stays true when the world tests you." I didn't know what he meant by "when the world tests you," but I would soon find out. A few days later, I went to visit my father again. This time, Rahul insisted on coming along. I was nervous, but he said gently, "He should see that I'm not afraid to stand beside you." When we reached the mansion, my father's expression hardened the moment he saw him. "Still here, are you?" he said coldly. Rahul smiled politely. "Always will be, sir. I promised your daughter forever." That should have softened the moment, but instead it made my father angrier. He turned to me. "Kiran, come to your senses. This man is holding you back." Rahul lowered his gaze. "Maybe, sir, but I'd rather hold her hand in poverty than lose her to pride." My father's voice rose. "Enough. I don't want to hear another word." And for the first time, I saw Rahul's eyes dim with helplessness. That night, he didn't come to bed. I found him asleep on the couch, his notebook open beside him. I peeked at the page, and all it said was, "I hope one day he'll understand." A week later, my father called me to his house alone. When I arrived, he looked tired, almost defeated. He handed me a letter. "I found this," he said quietly. "It's addressed to you from Rahul." I frowned. "How did you—" "It was mailed here by mistake," he said. "But I read it. And Kiran, He stopped speaking. His voice broke, and for the first time in my life, I saw tears fill his eyes. The same man who believed money could buy everything, now crying because of a poor man's words. When my father handed me the envelope, I could see his hands trembling. That alone startled me. I had never seen my father tremble, not when he lost business deals worth millions, not when reporters questioned his reputation. But that day, standing in his study with sunlight streaming through the tall windows, he looked fragile, human. The envelope was plain, off-white, slightly wrinkled, with my name written in Rahul's careful handwriting, Kiran. I reached for it, but my father didn't let go immediately. His grip lingered for a moment, as if he was holding on to something invisible. Pride, guilt, maybe both. Finally, he said quietly, "Read it, child. You need to—" I opened the letter slowly, feeling the weight of every fold. Inside were 2 pages, neat, simple, filled with words written by a hand that shook slightly from effort, not fear. "My dearest Kiran, if you're reading this, it probably means I didn't have the courage to say these things aloud. Maybe I feared that my words would sound small next to the life you left behind. Or maybe I just hoped that writing them down would make them last longer. You've given me more than you'll ever realize. Every morning when I see you smile at the little things, the tea I make, the way sunlight hits the wall, I feel rich, not in the way your world measures richness, but in the way my heart does. You once told me your father believes strength comes from money. I believe it comes from kindness. And you, Kiran, are the kindest soul I've ever met. But lately, I've seen sadness in your eyes. Maybe it's because you missed the life you left. Maybe it's because I can't give you the comfort you deserve. I want you to know that if one day you decide to go back to your father, to your old world, I won't stop you. Love shouldn't be a cage. All I ask is that you remember me kindly. Remember the nights we laughed over burnt toast. Remember the way I looked at you when you thought no one was watching? That look was my entire world. I may be poor in wealth, but I'm rich in love because of you. Yours always, Rahul. As I read, my hands began to shake. My throat tightened and my vision blurred. The room felt smaller, quieter, as if even the air was listening. I looked up at my father. His eyes were glistening, his usually perfect composure completely gone. He turned away quickly, pressing his fingers to his temple. I shouldn't have read it, he said softly. But I did. And now, I can't stop thinking about it, Dad. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw regret in his eyes. Not disappointment, not anger, regret. I thought love was measured by what we could give, he whispered. But that man, he gives without having anything. And I couldn't see it. He handed me the letter again. You need to go home to him. Those words hit me harder than anything he'd ever said. Home, he said. That's where love lives, Kiran. And I realize now, your home isn't here. Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. I hugged him, something I hadn't done in years. He didn't pull away. His arms came around me slowly, hesitantly, like someone learning to love again. When I returned to our apartment, it was quiet. The kettle on the stove was cold. Rahul wasn't there. For a second, panic rushed through me. I searched every room, calling his name. Then I noticed his notebook on the table, open to a blank page, and beside it, his worn jacket. I found him outside, sitting on the bench near the river. The sky was heavy with clouds, the wind carrying that soft chill that smells like rain. He was staring at the water, lost in thought. When he saw me, he smiled faintly. You went to see him, didn't you? I nodded, unable to speak. He turned back to the river. I hope he's all right. He is, I said softly. And he read your letter. That caught his attention. His eyes widened. He read it. Yes, it arrived by mistake. But Rahul, my voice broke. He cried. My father cried. Rahul blinked, silent. For a long moment, we both just sat there, the wind brushing past us. Then he whispered, maybe that's good. Maybe he needed to. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man I had nearly taken for granted. The man who gave without asking, who stayed even when I took his hand. He told me to come home, I said. Rahul frowned softly. You are home. Tears filled my eyes again. Yes, I am. That night, I cooked dinner for him for the first time in months. The meal wasn't perfect. The rice was a little overdone. And I nearly burned the curry, but when Rahul tasted it, he smiled like it was a feast. We ate quietly, occasionally exchanging smiles that said everything words couldn't. After dinner, I took out the letter and placed it on the table between us. Rahul, I said, you changed something in him. You made him see us, differently. He shook his head gently. I didn't change him. Love did. There was something about the way he said it, calm, certain, that made me realize how deep his heart truly ran. Later that night, as we sat by the window with tea in our hands, I asked him, do you think my father will ever forgive himself? Rahul smiled faintly. Fathers carry pride like armor, but sometimes, when the right words touch them, they learn to take it off. Slowly, the next morning my father called. His voice was soft, unsure. Would you and Rahul come to dinner tonight? I looked at Rahul. His eyes met mine. He nodded, a small, hopeful smile spreading across his face. The dinner that night was simple. No gold plates, no servants, no formality. My father cooked himself. He burned the edges of the bread, and Rahul laughed softly, helping him fix it. For the first time, the air between them wasn't heavy with judgment. It was filled with understanding, silent, fragile, but real. At one point, my father placed his hand over Rahul's and said quietly, "Thank you for loving my daughter better than I ever taught her to love herself." Rahul's eyes shimmered. "Thank you for raising a woman who knows how to forgive." And in that moment, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't a grand act. It's a quiet acceptance that pain can be replaced by grace. That night, when we went home, Rahul took my hand and whispered, "See, even stones cry when they meet love." I laughed softly, leaning against him. "You and your metaphors?" He smiled. "I'm a printer, Kiran. Words are my colors." And somehow, that felt like the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. After that dinner, something subtle shifted between all of us. It wasn't a grand movie-like reconciliation. No fireworks, no dramatic speeches. Just warmth, small, careful, real. The next morning, my father called again. His voice was gentler than I remembered. "Kiran, would you and Rahul like to come by on Sunday? I'm repainting the greenhouse. Thought you might enjoy helping." The greenhouse, the place where I used to hide as a child whenever I felt invisible in his world of meetings and numbers. I smiled. "We'd love to, Dad." When Rahul and I arrived, my father was already there, sleeves rolled up, brush in hand, an old shirt covered in splashes of green paint. It was almost comical, the billionaire who once refused to touch dust, now covered in color. "Good morning," Rahul said softly. My father turned, hesitated, then smiled. "You're just in time." There was a small moment of silence before they both started painting side by side. I stood nearby watching them talk, not about money, not about the past, but about small things, the weather, the neighborhood cricket. It felt like watching two languages, finally learning how to speak to each other. At one point, my father paused and looked at Rahul. "You know, I never told you this, but I built my empire after losing everything twice. Pride kept me going. Pride and fear. I thought if I ever looked weak, people would stop respecting me." Rahul dipped his brush slowly. Sometimes fear and love wear the same face. One protects, the other heals. My father nodded. "You're wiser than you look." Rahul smiled. "You're kinder than you sound." They both laughed, awkward at first, but genuine. And I, standing there with my brush, felt tears prick at the corner of my eyes. Over the next few weeks, my father began visiting our apartment. At first, he'd bring fruits or groceries, pretending it was just to help. But soon, he came simply to sit with us, to talk, to share tea. One evening, he arrived with a small box. "I found something in the storage room," he said, placing it on the table. Inside were photos from my childhood, birthdays, school events, trips to the countryside. He picked one up, smiling faintly. "You used to hide behind your mother's scarf whenever people tried to take pictures. Shy little thing." I laughed softly. "I still am, sometimes." He looked at Rahul then. "She's changed. You brought back her laughter." Rahul shook his head. "She found it herself. I just reminded her where it was." It was strange hearing such warmth from two men who once saw each other as enemies. But in that moment, I realized, forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It replaces it with understanding. One rainy afternoon, I found my father sitting with Rahul in our small living room. They were reading the newspaper together, debating sports scores. Something about the sight made my heart swell. Later, when Rahul left to make tea, my father turned to me. "Kiran," he said quietly, "I used to think love was something people earned, that you had to prove it with things, cars, houses, success. But when I read that letter, I saw love for what it truly is, unmeasured, undeserved, and still freely given." I touched his hand. "He never wanted to take anything from you, Dad. Just your blessing." My father's voice broke slightly. "And he has it now. All of it." He exhaled deeply, almost like a man setting down a burden he'd carried too long. Months passed. Rahul's small printing business began to grow slowly but steadily. He worked hard, but he never lost his gentle heart. My father even helped him register the shop officially and get a small loan. When the new signboard was installed, Rahul and Kiran Prince, my father stood beside us, proud. "Looks beautiful," he said, brushing a bit of dust off the edge. Rahul smiled. "So does our life now." That night, as we walked home together, the streets glowed with the orange warmth of London lights. Rain drizzled softly, making the reflections shimmer on the pavement. I held Rahul's arm and whispered, "You know, I never thanked you properly." He looked at me, puzzled. "For what?" "For teaching me that love doesn't need wealth to feel rich." He smiled, that same shy, quiet smile that first captured my heart. "And for teaching me that pride doesn't make a person strong," he said gently. "Patience does." Weeks later, my father invited us to a small family dinner, just the three of us. He had set the table himself, even placed a small vase of daisies in the center. "Your favorite," he said to me. I laughed. "You remembered." We ate slowly, talked about nothing and everything. At one point, he stood up and handed Rahul something wrapped in brown paper. Rahul opened it carefully. Inside was a framed copy of the letter, his own handwritten words, now pressed behind glass, the same one that had changed everything. "I kept the original," my father said. I wanted a reminder of the day I learned how love sounds. Rahul looked stunned, emotion tightening his face. "Sir, I don't know what to say." My father smiled softly. "Just keep writing letters. The world needs more of them." Rahul laughed quietly, wiping his eyes. "I will." That night, as we left the mansion, I looked back one last time. My father stood at the door, smiling, no longer a man of stone, but a man who had finally learned how to feel. Back home, Rahul placed the framed letter on our living room wall. Under the soft lamp glow, it looked almost sacred, a symbol of patience, humility, and love's quiet victory. I sat beside him, my head on his shoulder. He whispered, "Do you ever wonder what life would be if you hadn't walked out of that mansion?" I smiled. I'd still have chandeliers, but I'd never have peace. He kissed the top of my head. "Peace suits you better." We sat there for a long time, listening to the soft ticking of the clock. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the air smelled fresh, like new beginnings. Sometimes, I visit my father's mansion, not as his little girl who needed permission to live, but as his daughter who finally learned to love freely. We sit in the greenhouse with tea, surrounded by flowers that bloom without asking who planted them. Once, I asked him, "Do you ever regret the years we lost?" He smiled faintly. "Regret wastes time. I'd rather use it to love what's still here." And somehow, that was enough. When people ask me what wealth means, I think of that letter, a few pieces of paper, written by a poor man's trembling hands that changed the heart of a billionaire. It taught me that love doesn't arrive wrapped in gold. It arrives folded in simplicity, honest, fragile, pure. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. And sometimes it takes a poor man's words to remind the rich what richness really is. In the end, wealth can't measure the worth of love. Only kindness can. Sometimes life teaches us in the quietest ways, not through thunder or storms, but through letters, tears, and the gentle strength of those who love us, even when we don't deserve it. When I look back now, I realize that Rahul never wanted to win against my father. He just wanted to win me my trust, my peace, my heart, and my father. He wasn't the villain of my story. He was just a man who forgot how love sounds when it isn't spoken in money. But love has its own language. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it waits, and when the time is right, it changes even the hardest hearts. There was a time I thought my father's wealth defined me, that I was valuable only when surrounded by marble walls and luxury. But when I left that mansion, when I sat beside Rahul in our small, dim-lit apartment, I found something I had never felt before: contentment. Sometimes peace comes not from having more, but from needing less. Years have passed since that letter. Rahul's printing shop is now a small success, but that's not what makes me proud. It's the way he still greets each sunrise with gratitude, still holds my hand as if the world can't touch us. My father visits every weekend. He laughs louder now, breathes slower, and sometimes he even apologizes without words, just by showing up. We don't talk about the past anymore. We just live in the present, where love feels enough. If you're listening to my story tonight, remember this: don't measure love by how much it gives you. Measure it by how gently it holds you when everything else fades. Sometimes the poorest hearts give the richest love, and sometimes the richest souls are the ones who finally learn to be humble. That's all from me. I'm Kiran, and this was our story. A story of pride, loss, forgiveness, and a letter that changed everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. And tell me, what would you do for love if it meant losing everything first? Until next time, stay kind, stay humble, and remember, real love doesn't shine in gold. It glows in the dark.